Delaware's High Court has struck down two new voting laws pushed by Democrats in the state. Now banned what's called no-excuse mail-in voting, and residents in that state will not be allowed to register and vote on Election Day. So, this should give pause to those on the right saying that state courts should not weigh in on the constitutionality of state legislatures determining anything about voting laws. And on the flip side, here's the problem for those on the left in Delaware. Delaware's state constitution is pretty clear on this. Two bills passed quickly in June, allowing for universal voting by mail and the ability to register to vote on Election Day. The bills were introduced after Democrats failed to get Republican support to amend the state constitution, which requires a two-thirds majority in two general assemblies in a row. Delaware's Supreme Court issued a three-page order on Friday overturning the laws. Absentee ballots are scheduled to be sent out this week, so they wanted to get it out quickly. Delaware's constitution allows someone to vote absentee only if they can't go to the polls on Election Day because of public service, because of work, or if they're accompanying a spouse or dependent to work. Someone may also vote absentee because of illness, disability, vacation, or religious reasons. Proponents of the law had argued that absentee ballots, referred to in the state constitution, were different from mail-in ballots, but the court rejected that distinction. The Constitution also says that registration must begin at least 60 days before an election and must end no later than between 10 days before an election. A justice pointed out during the arguments that the 10-day period is to allow for registration rolls to be corrected and to allow for appeals for anyone denied the ability to register. Mail-in voting was allowed in 2020 in Delaware under an emergency provision because of the pandemic. 500,000 people voted, with about 166,000 casting mail-in ballots. In the state primary on September 13th, 50,000 people voted, with 10,000 voting by mail. Delaware Attorney General Kathy Jennings, a Democrat, said in a statement Friday, extremists are celebrating today at voters' expense. But is that really the right or fair response? Whether you agree with the laws or not, the state's constitution seems pretty clear, and undermining the courts by Democrats or Republicans when it comes to voting in particular is a dangerous business. Joining me now, Stephen Friedman, a law professor at Widener University in Delaware. He signed on to a brief for the court in support of expanding the vote to mail-in as well. Thanks very much, Professor, for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So were you surprised by the court's ruling here?
I was not surprised on the issue of same-day registration because I do think that was relatively clear in the Constitution. I was a little bit surprised by the decision on no-excuse mail-in voting. Having said that, it was a reasonable, it's not the position I would have preferred, but I understand it and it's reasonable.
Well, look, that's why I like having someone like you on the show, right? You advocated for expanded voting, right? And that's a policy that people can dispute, et cetera. But you were also not doing what the Attorney General, I think, did by claiming extremists have won. I think it's dangerous business to start criticizing every court that comes down with a ruling, particularly in the voting space, that people don't like. And that's what we're seeing across the country. Here, I get it. Democrats don't like it. You don't like it. But you're also not saying the court is corrupt or trying to undermine the credibility of the court.
That's right. And I think the Delaware Supreme Court is just such an incredibly well-respected court that when it speaks, people listen.
And that's another point, is that these courts have to be able to maintain their credibility. And I worry that increasingly, people are trying to undermine the faith in the rulings of these courts across the country, these state courts who are weighing in election cases. Have you specifically criticized or spoken to any of the more outspoken folks on your side of the aisle who are attacking the court?
No, I really wouldn't. I'm really not speaking to them. But I do think that, in fairness, there were reasonable arguments on both sides of this one. And I think that vote by mail has become so charged and such a partisan issue on both sides that whatever the decision was, people were going to be upset.
Right. But again, upset is one thing, right? I have spoken out repeatedly about maintaining the credibility of our courts, including the United States Supreme Court, including the state courts, across the board. And I get attacked on the right or the left, depending on who I'm defending, right? As to when I defend the Supreme Court, I get attacked by the left. When I defend state courts' rulings, which are overturning state legislatures, usually I'm getting attacked by the right. But here, that's why I found this decision to be so surprising, is a state Supreme Court stepping in and overturning Democratic laws to try to expand voting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're exactly right.
Professor, thanks so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And so keep in mind, this is going to be something that I'm going to talk about on the show in an ongoing way, right? Which is you're going to hear me defending institutions that I think no one else wants to defend. Law enforcement on the local level. The FBI, Capitol Police, Supreme Court, state courts, I know. Depending on which side I'm on, you're either angry at me one side or the other. Banfield starts now. Thank you for watching. Go to NewsNationNow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.